Jeepies, I'm your host Sid, and welcome to Doo Talkin to me's Scooby-Doo's Day. This time I'll be talking about Scooby-Doo Where Are You Episode 9, The Backstage Rage. After delivering one of the strongest episodes of the original series, Episode 9 is a fairly modest effort in comparison, but it still has a unique premise. While Shaggy and Scoob are headed from a late night at, big surprise, a pizza parlor, they witness a speeding car drop a violin case that contains thousands of dollars.
Oh, moly, what's this? It's full of money!
Shaggy leaves the case with Scoob so the hippie can call the rest of the gang and maybe also his dealer, but Scoob ends up distracted by a poodle, which is always the female version of a dog in cartoons. And by the time the gang arrives, the case Scooby guarded is long gone. The gang suspects a counterfeiting ring is loose in the area, and using a marionette controller as their only lead, the gang heads to the nearby puppet theater to investigate.
You got it!
That's it! Counterfeiters!
Honestly, this sounds more like a case that the police should definitely take care of. I mean, there isn't a hint of supernatural activity early on. They know ahead of time that there is a counterfeiting operation being run. It's not like ghosts and monsters need to pay bills or anything. Of course, though, the gang has to take a mystery where they can get it, so they head to Pietro's Puppets and meet with the doorman inside named Pop, who was just sorta idly geppettoing by himself in the dark with a puppet named Johnny. Well, at least he didn't shoot on sight for trespassing.
Are you a puppet master?
Oh, my no. I just fiddle with them as a hobby.
You're okay with me, Pop.
Pop the doorman is honestly a very amiable fellow, which always makes a suspect especially suspicious, and after Shaggy finds $20, the gang heads out of the theater because $20 was a lot back in the 60s.
About that audition,
Not right now. We've really got to go.
The gang assumes that the $20 bill is as queer as a $3 bill, but no, it's legal tender, not a forgery, but Fred leaps to conclusions that the legitimate 20 was planted deliberately to throw them off the trail.
And then we wouldn't think of going back.
So they pretty much break into the theater later to investigate. I guess the main reason why Mystery Inc. is so effective is because they don't have to deal with warrants or due process. Maybe we should totally rethink the justice system and put all criminal investigations in the hands of unarmed teenage civilians.
I wish we had a clue to a clue.
I honestly have mixed feelings overall about Backstage Rage. Chief among my issues is that it isn't really a strong mystery premise. Illegal activity is already clear and there's only one suspect in the episode, Pop the doorman, and as soon as the gang leaves during his first scene, he does a suspicious side-eye glance. That is basically an admission of guilt right there to the audience. I guess maybe it's possible that Johnny the puppet could be responsible in some sort of Scarface and the ventriloquist situation, but that isn't super likely, unless... Anyway, since the case is pretty open and shut from the start from the audience perspective, the mystery just kinda feels like killing time until the obvious is revealed. The disguised villain in the episode also isn't very memorable. The Phantom of the Puppet Theater is just a guy who looks like a theater instructor wearing a gray mask, and even though he can talk, he doesn't really get any good lines.
you know my secret!
The thing that really makes episode 9, though, is the actual setting of the puppet theater. Visually, the backstage areas do look bland, but the Phantom's employ of human-sized, realistic puppets and how he constantly sabotages the stage in an attempt to waylay the gang's efforts make the episode a nice change of pace. Still, Backstage Rage lacks in the wacky set pieces the show is normally known for, featuring a pretty basic chase sequence and a scene where Shaggy and Scooby put on some costumes to kill a bit of time. After discovering solid evidence of the counterfeiting scheme, though, the gang elects to finally leave the puppet theater and alert Pop the doorman to the presence of illegal activities inside that he certainly couldn't possibly know about, seeing as he's the doorman of the building. Pop was supposedly transformed into a puppet, though, which is pretty creepy and a decent way to try to throw viewers off the trail late into the episode, but it doesn't matter that much since 4 minutes later the gang spots the Phantom up in the catwalk above. Honestly, it's a bit strange how it didn't occur to the gang earlier to check up there. In a very rare instance, Scooby actually is brave and successfully apprehends the Phantom without much fuss, which is also unusual. The unmasking happens off screen, but the Phantom is revealed to be Pop the Doorman, running a counterfeiting scheme. Really surprising. What is actually surprising, though, is that Pop's true identity is Pietro, the man actually in charge of the puppet theater.
But old Mr. Pietro posing as a doorman sure had us fooled for a while.
I don't know why part of his plan was to pretend to be a doorman, especially a puppeteer doorman. I'd think if somebody recognized him as Pietro, his whole scheme would be done for. No further explanations about Pietro's scheme are given, though, since Pietro was silent during his arrest, which was typical during the early days of the show. To make up for the silence is Scooby hamming things up like always. The Backstage Rage isn't a bad episode, it's just a pretty average one. It's one of those episodes I don't usually rewatch since the mystery isn't very interesting, nor is the villain. I give it 3 Scooby snacks out of 5. Want a double dose of Scooby every Tuesday? Support the channel on Patreon or channel memberships and you'll get a bonus episode commentary. The link to this episode's commentary on Patreon is in the description below. If you like this episode, like it, and if you loved it, subscribe for more and click the bell icon to keep track of when future videos and live streams go live. I'd like to thank the true Wolfulite supporters of the Dr. Wolfula Patreon and channel memberships for their pledges. Their support is greatly appreciated and helps the channel continue to grow. Thanks, guys. See you all in the next episode of Doo Talkin to Me. Jeepies.